The proposal came in winter, not with roses but with ruin staring through frosted glass. Elena Whitmore stood in the skeletal remains of her father's estate, watching creditors strip the walls bare, when Adrian Blackthorne, the coldest duke in England, walked through the door and offered her a bargain. Not love, not rescue, a transaction. She had 48 hours before eviction. He had a reputation that needed mending. One word would save her. One word would cage her. But when you're drowning, you don't ask if the hand pulling you up has warm fingers. Stay with me until the end. Like and comment with your city. I want to see how far this story travels. The chandeliers were gone. Elena noticed that first. The heavy crystal fixtures that had thrown rainbows across the entrance hall every afternoon for 23 years, sold 3 weeks ago to a merchant from Dover who didn't even ask their history. Just weighed them, nodded, and handed over a banknote that wouldn't cover a month's debt interest. Now there were just hooks, empty iron claws jutting from the ceiling like accusations. Miss Whitmore, we'll need the paintings by Thursday. She turned. Mr. Griffith stood in the doorway, his ledger open, his face professionally blank. He'd been her father's solicitor once. Now he was just another man with a list, counting down what was left. The paintings, Elena repeated. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. Which ones? All of them, I'm afraid. The Gainsborough alone might settle the outstanding amount with the coal merchant, though we'll need independent valuation. The portrait of my mother? Griffith's pen paused, just for a moment. Yes, miss. I'm sorry. Elena looked past him, toward the drawing room where that portrait still hung. Her mother at 19, before marriage, before sickness, before everything good got slowly stripped away. It was the only image of her left. No daguerreotypes, no sketches. Just oil and canvas and a smile Elena barely remembered except through paint. Thursday, she said. Thursday, Griffith confirmed. He cleared his throat. And miss, the house itself goes to auction Monday week. You'll need to have your personal effects removed by the prior Sunday. I can recommend a modest boarding house in... Thank you, Mr. Griffith. That will be all. He hesitated, something almost human flickering across his features. Then he bowed slightly and left, his footsteps echoing through rooms that had once been full of rugs thick enough to silence anything. Elena stood in the empty hall and breathed. The house was dying. Had been dying for years, really, ever since her father's shipping investments went bad. Then worse. Then catastrophic. He'd borrowed against the estate, then borrowed against the borrowing, each new creditor more dangerous than the last. Elena had watched him age a decade in 2 years, watched him stop sleeping, stop eating, stop looking her in the eye. Then 6 months ago, he'd stopped breathing entirely. Heart failure, the doctor said. Standing in this very hall, hat in hand, voice low and respectful. But Elena knew. You could die of debt just as surely as disease. The weight of it had crushed him from the inside out, and now it was crushing her. She walked through the drawing room, the library, the morning room, all of them skeletal now, furniture sold, carpets rolled and carted away. The house felt vast and hollow, like a rib cage with the heart cut out. In the kitchen, Mrs. Blevins was packing the last of the copper pots. You don't have to do that, Elena said quietly. The old cook looked up, her face creased with something fiercer than pity. And where else would I be, miss? Sitting idle while you do it yourself? I can't pay you. Didn't ask you to. Elena's throat tightened. Mrs. Blevins had been with the family since before Elena was born, had taught her to make pastry, to pluck a chicken, to tell when bread dough had risen enough by pressing one finger into its pale surface. Small skills, warm skills, the kind that meant nothing to creditors. You should go to your sister's, Elena said. In Canterbury. She'd take you. Probably. Mrs. Blevins wrapped a saucepan in newspaper with sharp, decisive movements. But I'll see you settled first. I'm not going to be settled, Mrs. Blevins. I'm going to be... Elena stopped. She didn't actually have a word for it. Homeless felt too dramatic. Ruined felt too Victorian. Utterly fucked felt too honest. The cook set down the saucepan and crossed the kitchen. She took Elena's hands, rough, warm fingers against Elena's cold ones, and looked her dead in the eye. You're a Whitmore, she said firmly. Your mother didn't raise a girl who breaks. My mother died when I was 7. Then she raised you fast, and she raised you right. You'll manage, miss. You always do. Elena wanted to believe that, wanted to feel the spine-deep certainty in Mrs. Blevins' voice. But standing in a gutted kitchen, 3 days from eviction, with exactly £4 and 6 shillings to her name, managing felt like a fairy tale. She squeezed the cook's hands and let go. "I'm going for a walk," she said. Mrs. Blevins frowned. "It's near freezing out." "I know." "And getting dark." "I know." "Take your heavy cloak at least." "The blue one?" "No, wait, we sold that one." "The gray wool then?" Elena almost smiled. Almost. "Yes, ma'am?" She pulled on the gray cloak, thinner than it should be but still hers, and stepped out into the February cold. The grounds were as ruined as the house. The gardens her mother had loved were overgrown, hedges ragged and untrimmed. The fountain had been dry for 2 years. The little stone bench near the rose arbor had a crack running through it like a scar. Elena walked past all of it, her breath clouding white, her boots crunching over gravel that needed raking. She'd spent her whole childhood here, learned to read on that bench, climbed those trees, hid in the hedge maze when her governess called for lessons. It had been a small estate, nothing grand, but it had been hers, her world, her safety, her name. Now it was a carcass. She reached the edge of the property, where the low stone wall separated Whitmore land from the road beyond. She could see the village lights in the distance, small glowing windows, families at dinner, normal people living normal lives, unaware that a half-mile away, a girl who used to be someone was now nothing at all. "Pathetic," Elena muttered to herself. "Talking to yourself is the first sign, you know." She spun. A man stood 10 feet away, half hidden in the shadow of an old oak. Tall, dark coat, dark hair, dark eyes that reflected the last of the dying light, like chips of black ice. Elena's pulse kicked hard. "Who are you?" she demanded, trying to sound commanding and not terrified. The man stepped forward. The shadows peeled away from him slowly, revealing a face that was all sharp lines and cold angles, handsome the way a knife is handsome. Dangerous and precise. "Adrian Blackthorne," he said. His voice was low, clipped, utterly devoid of warmth. "Duke of Ravencourt." Elena's stomach dropped. Everyone knew that name. The youngest duke in England, inherited at 24 when his father died under scandalous circumstances, no one spoke about openly, ruthless in business, brutal in society, cold enough that people said he had winter in his veins instead of blood. And he was standing in her ruined garden like he owned it, which she realized with creeping horror he very well might soon. "What are you doing here?" she asked, keeping her chin up even as her heart hammered. "I came to see you." "Why?" "Because I have a proposition." Elena laughed. It came out sharp and bitter. "If you're here to buy the estate before auction, you're wasting your time. The creditors have first claim. You'd have to settle every debt, and trust me, Your Grace, there are a lot of debts." "I know," Blackthorne said calmly. "I've reviewed them." She blinked. "You... what?" "Your father owed money to 16 different creditors. Most of them are minor. Tradesmen, a tailor, a wine merchant. But 3 of them are significant: a bank, a shipping company, and a private lender named Edward Carver, who charges interest rates that should be criminal and probably are. Elena stared at him. "How do you know all that?" "I make it my business to know things." He tilted his head slightly, studying her the way one might study a horse at auction, assessing, calculating. "You're about to lose everything." "I'm aware. You have no family to take you in." "Also aware. No prospects, no income, no husband." "Is there a point to this?" Elena snapped, anger flaring hot beneath the cold. "Or did you just come here to catalog my failures for sport?" Something flickered in Blackthorne's expression. Not quite amusement, but close. "I came here to offer you a solution. I don't need marriage." The word hung in the freezing air between them. Elena stared. "Excuse me?" "Marry me," Blackthorne said, as casually as someone might suggest tea. "I'll settle your debts, keep the estate from auction, and provide you with an income and security. In return, you'll fulfill the social role of duchess, attend events, manage the household, represent the family name in public." "You're joking." "I don't joke. You're..." Elena's mind was racing, stumbling, crashing into walls. "You don't even know me." "I know enough. You're gentry-born, educated, and old enough to be married without scandal. You're desperate, which means you won't make romantic demands I can't meet, and you're sensible, or you would have already accepted one of the 3 proposals you've received in the last year. How do you— She stopped, shook her head. This is insane. It's practical. It's insane, Miss Whitmore. Blackthorn's voice didn't rise, but it hardened. In 3 days, you'll be evicted. You have no money, no relatives willing to house you, and no skills that will earn you a respectable living. Your choices are a marriage of convenience to a wealthy man, or poverty, possibly prostitution, if you're unlucky. I'm offering you the former. The bluntness of it hit like a slap. Elena's hands curled into fists inside her cloak. And what exactly do you get out of this? Respectability. You're a duke. You have respectability. I have a title, Blackthorn corrected. I don't have respectability. My father's death created rumors I've never been able to fully silence. Society tolerates me because of my wealth and position, but they don't trust me. A wife, a proper, gently bred wife, changes that. It softens my image, makes me less dangerous. So I'm a prop. You're a partner in a mutually beneficial arrangement. That's the same thing. No, Blackthorn said quietly. A prop has no agency. You would have a great deal of agency, Miss Whitmore. Money, freedom, protection. The ability to live your life without fear of creditors or starvation, or worse. All I ask is that you play the role in public. And in private? His eyes locked on hers. In private, we need never speak if you prefer it that way. The coldness in his voice should have repelled her, should have sent her running back to the house, slamming doors, choosing honorable poverty over this bloodless transaction. But Elena wasn't stupid. She'd watched her father drown in debt, watched pride and honor kill him inch by inch, and she'd learned something from that. Principles didn't pay creditors. Dignity didn't keep you fed. Sometimes survival meant swallowing everything you thought you believed and doing what had to be done. I need time to think, she said. You have until Friday morning. That's 2 days. Yes. You're not giving me much choice. I'm giving you the only choice you have left, Blackthorn said. Take it or leave it, Miss Whitmore, but decide quickly. I don't like waiting. He turned to go. Why me? Elena asked suddenly. He paused, glancing back over his shoulder. Why not some earl's daughter, some society girl who actually knows how to be a duchess? Blackthorn was silent for a long moment. Then, because they'd expect something from me I can't give. You won't. And what's that? Warmth. He said it so simply, so finally, like it was a fact of nature, immutable as winter. Then he walked away, disappearing into the dusk, leaving Elena standing alone in the cold with a choice that wasn't really a choice at all. She didn't sleep that night, just lay in her narrow bed, one of the few pieces of furniture left, and stared at the ceiling, turning it over and over in her mind. Marriage to Adrian Blackthorn. The man was a legend, a ghost story. People whispered about him at parties, half fascinated, half afraid. They said he'd inherited a crumbling estate and turned it into an empire, that he destroyed business rivals with surgical precision, that his own father had feared him at the end. And now he wanted to marry her, not for love, not even for affection, just for the optics of it. A transaction, a contract. It should have felt insulting. Instead, it felt honest. She thought of Thomas. God, she hadn't let herself think of him in months. Thomas Carmichael, her fiancé, former fiancé. They'd been engaged for 6 months when her father died. 6 months of planning a wedding, choosing flowers, imagining a future that felt warm and safe and normal. Then the creditors came, and Thomas had stood in this very house, looking uncomfortable and guilty and determined, and said the words that still burned, I can't do this, Elena. My family. They can't take on your father's debts. It wouldn't be fair to them. You understand, don't you? She'd understood perfectly. She'd understood that love was conditional, that promises lasted exactly as long as money did, that the man who'd kissed her in the garden and called her his future had meant it right up until his future looked expensive. She'd given him back the ring without a word. He'd looked relieved. So yes, she understood transactions, understood that people didn't stay unless there was something in it for them. At least Blackthorn was honest about it. At least he wasn't pretending this was anything other than what it was. Friday morning came too fast. Elena dressed carefully, her second-best gown, because the best one had been sold, and tried to eat the toast Mrs. Blevins insisted on making. It tasted like sawdust. "You don't have to do this, miss," the cook said quietly, watching her with worried eyes. "Yes, I do." "There are other ways." "Name one." Mrs. Blevins opened her mouth, closed it, looked away. "That's what I thought," Elena said softly. At precisely 9 o'clock, a carriage arrived, black and sleek and expensive, drawn by 4 matched horses. The driver climbed down, opened the door, and stood waiting. Elena pulled on her cloak. "All right," she told Mrs. Blevins. "You'd better." They hugged, brief and fierce, and then Elena walked out of Whitmore House for what might be the last time. The carriage ride was smooth and silent. She watched the countryside roll past, fields and hedgerows, and little stone cottages, all of it familiar and all of it already feeling like a memory. Then the scenery changed. The estates grew larger, the walls higher, the gates more imposing. And finally, they turned onto a long gravel drive lined with ancient oaks, leading up to a house that made Whitmore Manor look like a gardener's cottage. Raven Court. It sprawled across the hilltop like something out of a dark fairy tale, all gray stone and towers and windows that gleamed coldly in the winter sun. Massive, imposing, beautiful in the way storms are beautiful. The carriage stopped at the front steps. A butler materialized, tall, thin, impeccably dressed, and opened the door. "Miss Whitmore," he said with a precise bow, "His Grace is expecting you." Elena climbed out, her legs shaky, and followed the butler inside. The entrance hall was 3 times the size of her entire house. Marble floors, soaring ceilings, portraits of grim-faced blackthorns staring down like judges. Cold. Everything was cold. The butler led her through a series of corridors, each one more intimidating than the last, and finally stopped at a heavy oak door. He knocked once, waited. "Come." The butler opened the door and stepped aside. Elena walked in. It was a study. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a massive desk, a fire burning in the grate, the first warmth she'd felt since arriving. And behind the desk, standing with his back to her, looking out a window at the frozen grounds below, Adrian Blackthorne. He turned. In daylight, he was somehow sharper, more real. The dark eyes, the hard mouth, the absolute absence of anything soft. "Miss Whitmore," he said, "you came. Did you think I wouldn't? I thought you might choose pride over practicality." "I can't afford pride." Something shifted in his expression. Approval, maybe. Or just acknowledgement. "Have you made your decision?" he asked. Elena met his eyes, those cold, calculating eyes that promised nothing except exactly what he'd said. Money, safety, survival. No warmth, no love, no lies. She thought of the empty house, the creditors, the portrait of her mother being sold to strangers, Thomas's face when he'd walked away. She thought of what her life would be in 3 days if she said no, and she thought of what it might be if she said yes. Not happiness. She wasn't fool enough to hope for that, but maybe something else, something harder, something that didn't break when the money ran out. "I'll marry you," Elena said. Blackthorne nodded once. "Good. But I have conditions." His eyebrow rose slightly. "Go on." "I want my own rooms, my own space. I won't be—" She hesitated. "I won't share a bed unless absolutely necessary." "Agreed. I want control over the household, staff, menus, events. If I'm going to be your duchess, I'll do it properly, but I won't be decorative." "Agreed. And I want the Whitmore estate kept, not sold, not auctioned. If you're settling the debts, I want it preserved." Blackthorne was quiet for a moment. "Why?" "Because it's mine. It's all I have left of my family. And if this—" She gestured between them. "If this falls apart, I want somewhere to go." "It won't fall apart. You can't promise that." "I can promise that I honor contracts, Miss Whitmore. And this is a contract. If you uphold your end, I'll uphold mine. The estate will be kept. You'll have your space, you'll have authority, and you'll have my name and protection for as long as you want them." "And what if I want out?" "Then you leave. I won't stop you. But you'll leave with money, property, and security. I don't believe in burning bridges." It was, Elena realized, the most romantic thing anyone had ever said to her. Not because it was sweet, but because it was real. "When?" she asked. "The banns will be read starting Sunday. We'll marry in 3 weeks." "That fast?" "Your creditors won't wait, and neither will society gossip. The faster we move, the cleaner it looks." Elena nodded slowly. Her heart was pounding, but her hands were steady. This was happening. She was doing this, marrying a stranger. A cold, dangerous stranger who needed a wife the way a business needed a contract. It should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like the first solid ground she'd stood on in months. "All right," she said, 3 weeks. Blackthorn crossed the room. He held out his hand. Elena looked at it, pale, long-fingered, steady. She took it. His grip was firm and cool and absolutely devoid of tenderness. "Welcome to Ravencourt, Miss Whitmore," he said. And Elena realized, with a strange, cold clarity, that she'd just sold her future. She only hoped she'd gotten a fair price. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur. Contracts, lawyers, seamstresses measuring her for gowns she'd never imagined owning. The Whitmore debts vanished overnight, paid in full by a single bank draft bearing the Ravencourt seal. The house was saved. Mrs. Blevins wept. Elena felt numb. She moved through the preparations like a ghost, nodding when spoken to, signing where indicated. She met Blackthorn twice, once to approve the marriage settlement, once to discuss the guest list. Both times, he was polite, distant, efficient. He didn't ask how she was, didn't try to charm her. He treated her exactly like what she was, a business partner. And Elena told herself that was fine, that she didn't want charm or warmth or any of the lies that came with them. But late at night, alone in her borrowed room at Ravencourt, she sometimes wondered what she'd actually agreed to. Not a marriage, a merger. And mergers, she knew, were coldest right before they finalized. The wedding was set for the 1st of March, winter's last day. How fitting. The wedding happened on a Thursday. Elena woke that morning in a bedroom 3 times the size of her old one, staring at a ceiling painted with cherubs and clouds that seemed to mock her with their frozen joy. Her wedding dress hung on the wardrobe like a ghost. Ivory silk, Brussels lace, seed pearls that caught the weak March light. Beautiful. Expensive. Absolutely nothing to do with her. A maid she didn't know knocked softly and entered without waiting for permission. "Good morning, Your Grace," the girl said, then flushed. "I mean, soon to be. Miss Whitmore, I'm sorry, It's fine," Elena said, sitting up. The title felt wrong in her mouth already, like clothing that didn't fit. "What's your name?" "Margaret, miss." "Well, Margaret, let's get this over with." The girl's eyes widened slightly, but she nodded and began the process of transforming Elena into something she wasn't, a bride who wanted to be one. 2 hours later, Elena stood in front of a mirror and barely recognized herself. The dress fit perfectly. Her hair was pinned and curled and decorated with tiny white flowers that probably cost more than Mrs. Blevins made in a year. Her face was pale, her eyes too large, her expression carefully blank. She looked like a duchess. She felt like a fraud. "You're beautiful, miss," Margaret whispered. "I'm terrified," Elena replied, and the honesty of it made them both freeze for a second before Margaret squeezed her hand quickly and stepped back. A knock. The door opened. A different servant, one of the senior staff, judging by his severe expression, stood waiting. "They're ready, Miss Whitmore." Elena took one last breath and followed him out. The chapel was small, private, and freezing despite the candles burning at the altar. 20 guests, maybe. A few of Blackthorn's business associates. The local vicar looking nervous. No one from Elena's side except Mrs. Blevins sitting in the front pew with red eyes and a handkerchief clutched tight. And at the altar, waiting with his hands clasped behind his back like a general inspecting troops, Adrian Blackthorn. He wore black. Of course he did. Perfectly tailored, perfectly severe, no warmth anywhere in the cut or color. He watched her approach with those winter eyes, his expression unreadable. Elena walked down the aisle alone. No father to give her away. No family to smile encouragement. Just her, the dress, and the sharp click of her heels on stone. She reached the altar, stopped. Blackthorn's gaze swept over her once, assessing, she thought, checking that his investment looked presentable, and then he nodded fractionally. Miss Whitmore, he said quietly. Your Grace. The vicar cleared his throat nervously and began. Elena heard maybe half of it. The words washed over her in waves of liturgical rhythm, dearly beloved, lawful impediment, sickness, and health. All of it rehearsed and ancient and absolutely meaningless in the context of what this actually was. A transaction, a merger, a survival strategy dressed up in silk and sacrament. Do you, Elena Catherine Whitmore, take this man? I do, she said. Her voice didn't shake, small victory. And do you, Adrian Marcus Blackthorne, take this woman? I do. Flat, certain, like signing a contract. Then, by the power vested in me, the vicar kept talking, but Elena stopped listening because Blackthorne was reaching for her hand. His fingers were cool and steady, and he slid the ring onto her finger with the same precision he probably used for everything. Calculated, controlled, complete. The gold band sat heavy and foreign. You may kiss the bride. Elena's stomach dropped. They hadn't discussed this. Hadn't practiced. Hadn't even... Blackthorne leaned in. His hand came up to cup her jaw. Not roughly, but not gently either. Just functional. And then his mouth was on hers. It was quick, chaste, absolutely devoid of passion. A checkbox ticked. He pulled back, released her, and turned to face the sparse congregation without expression. Ladies and gentlemen, the vicar said weakly, the Duke and Duchess of Ravencourt. Polite applause. A few forced smiles. Mrs. Blevins was crying. And Elena, now legally, bindingly, irrevocably the Duchess of Ravencourt, felt nothing at all. Just cold. The breakfast afterward was worse than the ceremony. They sat at opposite ends of a long table in the formal dining room, 20 feet of polished mahogany between them. While servants brought course after course of food, Elena couldn't taste. The guests made strained conversation. Someone toasted the happy couple. Blackthorne raised his glass with mechanical courtesy. Elena drank her champagne too fast and immediately regretted it when the bubbles made her head swim. Across the table, one of Blackthorne's associates, Lord Something, she'd already forgotten, leaned toward her with an oily smile. You must be so pleased, Your Grace. Such a rapid courtship. Quite romantic, really. Elena forced a smile. Quite. And to save your family estate as well. Truly, it's like something from a novel. The way he said it made her skin crawl, like he knew exactly how unromantic it was. Like he was testing her, seeing if she'd crack. I'm very fortunate, she said evenly. Indeed, His Grace is known for his generosity. The pause before generosity was deliberate, pointed. Elena's fingers tightened on her glass, but before she could respond, Blackthorne's voice cut across the table. Lord Pemberton. The man's head snapped around. Your Grace? You're boring my wife. Silence dropped like a stone. Pemberton's face flushed. I was merely... You were fishing, Blackthorne said coldly. Stop. Pemberton shut his mouth. No one spoke for several seconds. Then Blackthorne rose smoothly, setting down his napkin. Gentlemen, ladies, thank you for attending. The Duchess and I have matters to attend to. It wasn't a suggestion. The guests began standing, murmuring polite farewells, filing out with varying degrees of haste. Within 5 minutes, the dining room was empty, except for Elena, Blackthorne, and the servants clearing plates. Elena stood, her legs unsteady. From the champagne or the morning, she wasn't sure. You didn't have to do that, she said. Blackthorne was already walking toward the door. Do what? Defend me. From Pemberton. He paused, glancing back. He was being rude. I don't tolerate rudeness at my table. Your table, Elena repeated, not ours. Something flickered in his expression. Irritation, maybe. A figure of speech. Was it? They stared at each other across the empty room. Then Blackthorne sighed. The first human sound she'd heard from him all day. Come with me. We should talk. He led her through the house. More corridors, more portraits, more cold marble, until they reached a different wing entirely. He stopped at a door, opened it, and stepped aside. Your rooms, he said. Elena walked in and froze. It was a suite, sitting room, bedroom, dressing room, all connected and decorated in shades of cream and gold that felt warmer than the rest of the house. A fire burned in the hearth, books lined one wall, the windows overlooked the garden, snow-dusted and quiet. She didn't have words. Yours, Blackthorn finished. Completely. I won't enter without permission. Where are your rooms? Next wing over. You'll have privacy. Elena turned to face him. He stood in the doorway, hands in his pockets, watching her with that same unreadable expression. This is really how it's going to be? She asked. Separate wings, separate lives, just coexisting? That was the agreement. I know, but... She stopped. What was she arguing for? Intimacy with a man who'd made it clear he had none to offer? But what? Blackthorn prompted. Nothing, Elena said quietly. Thank you for the rooms. He nodded once, started to leave. Adrian. He stopped, turned back. The use of his first name seemed to catch him off guard. What happens now? Elena asked. Now you settle in, learn the house, meet the staff. Tomorrow we'll start on the social calendar. There are events we'll need to attend together. And that's it? What else did you expect? I don't know, Elena said honestly. Some kind of instruction manual, rules, expectations beyond show up and look appropriate? Blackthorn considered this. Don't embarrass me. Don't spend recklessly. Don't interfere with my business. Everything else is yours to manage as you see fit. Very romantic. I didn't promise romance. No, Elena agreed. You didn't. They stood there, this strange married couple, who were less intimate than strangers, until Blackthorn finally nodded and left, closing the door quietly behind him. Elena sank onto the sofa and stared at the fire. She was a duchess now. She had money, security, a future that didn't involve starvation or worse. She should feel grateful. Instead, she felt like she'd traded one cage for another. This one larger, more luxurious, but still locked. The first 2 weeks were an education in loneliness. Elena learned the house, hundreds of rooms, most of them unused, all of them maintained to within an inch of perfection by a staff of 40 she barely saw. She learned their names, Harrison the butler, Mrs. Graves, the housekeeper, Margaret her maid, Cook whose actual name was Mrs. Patterson, but who everyone called Cook. She learned the routines, breakfast at 8, lunch at 1, dinner at 7. Blackthorn attended none of them. He took meals in his study, worked until midnight, and apparently survived on coffee and single-minded focus. She saw him exactly 3 times, once in passing in the hallway. He nodded. She nodded back. They kept walking. Once when she knocked on his study door to ask about a household matter. He'd answered her question in 4 sentences and returned to his ledgers. And once at dinner, the first and only meal they'd shared since the wedding, when he'd informed her they had an event the following week, a ball at Lord and Lady Ashford's estate. You'll need an appropriate gown, he'd said. I have gowns. You'll need a new one, something that makes a statement. What kind of statement? That you belong here. Elena had set down her fork carefully. Do I? That's what we're selling, Blackthorn said. So yes. The gown arrived 3 days later. Midnight blue silk with silver embroidery, cut to fit her perfectly, despite the seamstress never actually measuring her. However Blackthorn had arranged it, the result was stunning. Elena hated it. She hated that it was beautiful, hated that it fit, hated that wearing it would mean playing the role he'd hired her for. But she put it on anyway, because that was the deal. Margaret helped with her hair, swept up, elegant, decorated with silver combs that matched the dress. You look like a queen, Your Grace, the maid said softly. I look like a liar, Elena replied, and Margaret's face went carefully blank. Blackthorn was waiting in the entrance hall when she came down. He wore evening clothes, black and severe as always, and when he saw her, something shifted in his expression. Not warmth, not attraction, but assessment passing into approval. Good, he said simply. Is that all I get? Good? What else do you want? I don't know. Maybe you look nice, or thank you for putting in effort, or literally any acknowledgement that I'm a person and not a decorative object. Blackthorn's jaw tightened. You look very nice. Thank you for putting in effort. Now can we go? Charming. I didn't promise charm either. The carriage ride was silent. Elena stared out the window at the dark countryside rolling past, very aware of Blackthorn sitting across from her, equally silent, equally separate. Are you going to tell me anything about this event? She asked finally. It's a ball. You dance, make conversation, smile. With you? When necessary. How reassuring. Elena. His voice was quiet but sharp. What do you want from me? She looked at him. Really looked. In the dim carriage light, his face was all shadows and hard angles carved from something that didn't bend. I want to know why you're doing this, she said. I told you. No, you told me you need respectability. But you don't need a wife for that. You could hire a social secretary, make donations, attend the right events. You don't need me. So why am I actually here? Blackthorn was quiet for a long time. The carriage wheels rattled over cobblestones. Because, he said finally, people don't trust men who stay alone. They think we're hiding something. A wife legitimizes, makes us safer. Safer how? Less suspicious. Less likely to be investigated, questioned, undermined. He looked at her directly. I have enemies, Elena. Business rivals who'd love to destroy me. A wife makes it harder for them to find angles of attack. So I'm armor. Your protection, he corrected, for both of us. And what are you protecting me from? Poverty, ruin, the same things you were running from when you said yes. It was honest, at least. Brutally, coldly honest. Elena leaned back against the seat. We're using each other. Yes, and you're fine with that. I'm fine with clarity, Blackthorn said. I'd rather honest use than dishonest love. You don't believe in love? I believe it's temporary, conditional, and dangerous to depend on. That's bleak. That's experience. The carriage slowed. They were arriving. Blackthorn straightened, his expression shifting into something more neutral, more public. When we go in, he said, stay close. Let me introduce you. Don't engage with anyone who seems hostile. There will be several. And if anyone asks about our courtship, keep it vague. Vague how? We met through mutual friends. The connection was immediate. We're very happy. That sort of thing. We're lying. We're managing perceptions. It's the same thing. Elena. He leaned forward slightly. This is the deal. You play the role, I provide the life. Don't make it harder than it needs to be. The carriage stopped. A footman opened the door. Blackthorn stepped out first, then turned and offered his hand. Elena took it, letting him help her down, and they walked into the lion's den together. The Ashford estate was everything Ravencourt wasn't. Bright, warm, full of people and laughter and light. Chandeliers blazed. Music swelled from a string quartet. Guests in glittering gowns and evening coats clustered in groups. Champagne glasses in hand, voices rising in that particular rhythm of high society, loud enough to be heard, quiet enough to seem refined. A servant announced them. His Grace, the Duke of Ravencourt, and Her Grace, the Duchess of Ravencourt. The room didn't go silent, but it shifted. Heads turned, conversations paused, eyes tracked them as they descended the stairs. Elena felt every single gaze like a physical weight. Blackthorn's hand settled at the small of her back, proprietary, possessive, and guided her forward. Smile, he murmured. She did. It felt like glass. They made it approximately 10 feet before someone intercepted them. Blackthorn, you sly devil, you actually did it. The man was older, florid-faced, grinning like he'd won a bet. Lord Ashford himself, Elena realized. My lord, Blackthorn said with cool politeness. Thank you for the invitation. Wouldn't miss it for the world. Had to see the mystery bride everyone's talking about. Ashford turned to Elena, his gaze sweeping over her with unconcealed curiosity. Your Grace, charmed, absolutely charmed. Tell me, how did a nobody from... Where was it, Sussex? Kent, Elena said evenly. Kent, yes. How did you manage to snag the most elusive bachelor in England? The insult was wrapped in joviality, but it was still an insult. Elena felt Blackthorn's hand tense against her back. Before he could respond, she smiled wider. Persistence, she said sweetly, and a complete lack of shame. Ashford blinked, then laughed. A big booming sound. I like her. Blackthorn, you've got a live one. So it seems, Blackthorn said dryly. They moved on. You didn't have to do that, he murmured. Do what? Make a joke of it. Would you have preferred I slapped him? Honestly? Yes. Elena glanced up, startled, and caught the faintest twitch at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile, but close. They made the rounds. Blackthorne introduced her to a blur of lords and ladies, MPs and merchants, all of them polite to her face and clearly gossiping the second they turned away. She heard the whispers, caught fragments. Married for money, obviously. Father's debts, you know? Practically destitute, I heard. Wonder how long it'll last. Elena kept smiling, kept nodding, kept playing the role, but inside something was hardening. They thought she was weak, a charity case, a fortune hunter who'd gotten lucky. They had no idea what she'd survived to get here. The music shifted. A waltz. Blackthorne turned to her. We should dance. Should we? People are watching. Let them watch. Elena. His voice dropped. Please. It was the please that did it. The smallest crack in his armor. She let him lead her onto the floor. His hand settled at her waist. Hers rested on his shoulder. They began to move, and Elena realized with dim surprise that he was an excellent dancer, smooth, confident, leading without forcing. You're good at this, she said. I had expensive tutors. For dancing? For everything. They turned, swept past other couples, the room blurring into light and color. They hate me, Elena said quietly. They hate what you represent. Which is? That I might be human after all. She looked up at him. His face was carefully neutral, but there was something in his eyes, something almost vulnerable. Are you? She asked. Human? I'm not sure anymore. The honesty of it caught her off guard. The music swelled. They turned again. And then a voice cut through the melody like a knife. Well, Elena Whitmore. Sorry. Elena Blackthorne now, isn't it? Elena's stomach dropped. She knew that voice. Blackthorne felt her tense. What's wrong? Nothing, she said quickly, but it was too late. The music ended. The couples around them were breaking apart, moving off the floor, and walking toward them, champagne glass in hand and malicious smile on his face, was Thomas Carmichael, her former fiancé, the man who'd abandoned her when the money ran out. Thomas, she said flatly. Your Grace, he corrected with mocking emphasis. My, haven't you landed on your feet? From penniless to duchess in what, 3 months? Impressive. Blackthorne's expression went glacial. And you are? Thomas Carmichael, old friend of your wife's. He smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. Very old friend. Acquaintance, Elena corrected sharply. Oh, I think we were a bit more than that, weren't we? Thomas took a sip of champagne, his gaze never leaving hers. Tell me, does your husband know about us? About the engagement? The promises? Elena's face went hot. Blackthorne's hand came to rest on her lower back again, steadying, claiming. I know everything relevant about my wife's past, he said coldly, including which parts aren't worth remembering. Thomas's smile faltered. Now, if you'll excuse us, Blackthorne continued, we have other guests to attend to. People who matter. He guided Elena away before Thomas could respond. They made it to a quieter corner of the room before Elena stopped, her hands shaking. I'm sorry, she said. I didn't know he'd be here. I didn't... Breathe. She looked up. Blackthorne was watching her with something that might have been concern. He's an ass, Blackthorne said simply. Yes, he is. And he hurt you. It wasn't a question. Elena swallowed hard. He left me. When my father died and the debts came, he just left. Blackthorne nodded slowly. Then he's an idiot as well as an ass. Why? Because he gave up something valuable out of cowardice. Elena's throat tightened. I'm not valuable. I'm just... Don't. Blackthorne's voice was sharp. Don't diminish yourself for him or anyone else. You're my duchess. That makes you untouchable. I'm your employee. You're my wife, he corrected. There's a difference. Is there? Before he could answer, Thomas appeared again, apparently drunk enough or stupid enough to try a second round. Blackthorne, he said loudly, drawing attention. I have to ask, did you know Elena and I were engaged before you swooped in? The room was watching now. Elena wanted to disappear. Blackthorn turned slowly, his expression deadly calm. "I did," he said. "And it didn't bother you? Taking another man's—" "You left her," Blackthorn interrupted. "The moment her situation changed, you ran. So no, Carmichael, it didn't bother me. I don't consider cowards competition." Thomas's face went red. And if you value your social standing even a fraction as much as you clearly value your pride, you'll walk away now, because if you don't, I'll make it my personal mission to ensure every door in London closes in your face." Silence. Thomas stood there, fists clenched, clearly weighing his options. Then he turned and stalked away. The room slowly resumed its noise. Elena realized she'd been holding her breath. "You didn't have to do that," she said quietly. "Yes, I did." "Why?" Blackthorn looked at her, really looked, like he was seeing something he hadn't expected. "Because you're mine to protect now," he said. "That's the deal." And for the first time since their wedding, Elena felt something crack in the ice between them. Not warmth, not yet, but the possibility of it. They left the ball early. Not dramatically. Blackthorn wasn't the type for scenes, but deliberately, with quiet goodbyes that cut short the evening before anyone else could corner Elena with thinly veiled insults, or Thomas could work up the courage for round 3. The carriage ride back was different from the ride there. The silence felt less hostile, more like two soldiers who'd just survived the same battle, too exhausted to speak but aware they'd fought on the same side. Elena's hands were still shaking. She pressed them flat against her lap, willing them to stop, but they wouldn't. The adrenaline from the confrontation was draining out of her system, leaving her hollow and shaky and unexpectedly close to tears. "You held up well," Blackthorn said. His voice came out of the darkness. They dimmed the carriage lamps, low and almost gentle. "I wanted to hit him," Elena admitted. "That would have been satisfying. But impractical. Very." A pause. "Though I would have enjoyed watching it." She laughed. It came out watery and broken, and suddenly the tears she'd been fighting spilled over. Elena turned her face toward the window, mortified. "I'm sorry, this is stupid." "It's not." She felt the seat shift as Blackthorn moved. Then his hand, cool and careful, pressed a handkerchief into hers. "He's not worth this," Blackthorn said quietly. "I know." "Then why are you crying?" Elena wiped her eyes, the expensive silk of the handkerchief soft against her skin. "Because I loved him, and he left anyway. And seeing him tonight, watching him try to humiliate me, it just confirmed that I was never anything to him except convenient. And when I stopped being convenient, I stopped mattering." Blackthorn was quiet. The carriage rolled on. "I understand that," he said finally. Elena looked at him through blurred vision. His face was half-shadowed, unreadable. "You do? Being left when you become inconvenient?" "Yes. I understand that very well." There was something in his voice, something raw and quickly buried, that made Elena forget her own tears. "Who left you?" she asked. Blackthorn's jaw tightened. "It doesn't matter." "It does if it's why you're like this." "Like what?" "Locked up, frozen, pretending you don't need anything from anyone." His eyes snapped to hers, sharp in the darkness. "I don't pretend. I genuinely don't need—" "Everyone needs something, Adrian." The use of his name seemed to stop him cold. They stared at each other. "You're wrong," he said finally, but his voice lacked conviction. "Then prove it. Tell me one thing you need. One honest thing." "Elena, one thing." Blackthorn looked away. His hands were clasped tight in his lap, knuckles white even in the dim light. "I need," he said slowly, like each word cost him, "to not fail again." "Fail at what?" "Protecting someone." His voice was barely audible. "I need to not watch someone I'm responsible for get destroyed because I didn't act fast enough or care enough or—" He stopped, took a breath. "I need to do it right this time." Elena's chest ached. "Who did you lose?" "My sister." The words fell like stones. Blackthorn turned back to the window, his profile carved from marble. "Her name was Caroline. She was 17, and she died because I chose duty over her safety. I thought I could manage both, thought I could handle my father's business and still protect her. I was wrong." Adrian, she got sick, consumption. I was in London closing a contract that would save the estate. By the time I got back, she was gone. His voice was flat, factual. I wasn't there. I chose business. I chose strategy. And she died alone. Elena's throat closed. That's why you married me, she said. Not for respectability, for redemption. Blackthorn's silence was answer enough. You think saving me makes up for losing her? I think, he said carefully, that I won't make the same mistake twice. I won't choose strategy over survival. Not again. So I'm your second chance. You're my responsibility, and I don't fail my responsibilities anymore. It should have felt insulting, being reduced to a task, a box to check, proof that Adrian Blackthorn had learned his lesson. But Elena heard the pain underneath it, the guilt that had carved him into this cold, controlled thing that couldn't afford warmth because warmth led to caring and caring led to loss. I'm not going to die, she said quietly. You don't know that. Neither do you. But I'm not your sister, Adrian, and you can't save me from something that already happened. My father's dead. The debts are paid. I'm safe. For now. That's all anyone gets for now. Blackthorn looked at her. Really looked. And for the first time, Elena saw past the ice to the terrified boy underneath, the one who'd lost someone and built walls so thick nothing could ever hurt him that way again. I don't know how to do this, he admitted. Do what? Be married. Be close to someone. Neither do I, Elena said. But maybe we could figure it out together. Badly. Imperfectly. But together. Something shifted in his expression. Not warmth. Not yet. But something less frozen. The carriage stopped. They'd arrived at Ravencourt. Blackthorn climbed out first, then offered his hand. Elena took it, letting him help her down, and they walked into the house side by side. In the entrance hall, he paused. Thank you, he said, for tonight, for handling Carmichael with more grace than he deserved. You handled him. We both did. It was the first time he'd used we like it meant something. Elena nodded. Good night, Adrian. Good night. She started toward her wing. Elena. She turned back. Blackthorn stood in the shadows, his face unreadable again, walls rebuilding. If you ever want to talk, he said slowly, like the words were foreign. About anything, I'm available. It was the most awkward, stilted offer of companionship Elena had ever heard. It was also the most genuine thing he'd ever said to her. Same, she said softly. I'm available too. He nodded once and disappeared into the darkness. Elena climbed the stairs to her rooms, her mind spinning. Something had changed tonight. Some invisible line had been crossed. They'd gone from strangers to something else. Not quite friends, not quite partners, but not enemies anymore. It was a start. The next 3 weeks, that fragile détente held. Blackthorn still worked impossible hours, still took meals in his study, still maintained his distance. But he started appearing at breakfast. Not every day, but enough that Elena stopped being surprised when she walked into the dining room and found him already there, reading the paper with his coffee. They talked. Small things, mostly. The weather. Household matters. Occasionally something deeper. A comment about a book. An observation about politics. A rare shared laugh over something absurd in the society columns. It wasn't intimacy, but it was less lonely. Elena started taking over the running of Ravencourt in earnest. Mrs. Graves, the housekeeper, was initially skeptical. She'd been managing the estate for 20 years without interference. But Elena had learned a few things from watching her own household collapse. You couldn't manage what you didn't understand, so she asked questions. She reviewed the books, the staff schedules, the supply orders. She noticed inefficiencies, rooms being heated that no one used, linens being replaced too frequently, a wine cellar stocked with vintages Blackthorn never drank. She made changes, small ones at first, then larger. Mrs. Graves went from skeptical to grudgingly approving to actively helpful. You've got a head for this, Your Grace, she said one afternoon, reviewing the revised household budget Elena had drawn up. Better than the last Duchess. Elena looked up sharply. There was a previous Duchess? Mrs. Graves's face shuddered. I misspoke. You didn't. Who was she? It's not my place. Mrs. Graves, please. The housekeeper sighed. She glanced toward the door, checking they were alone, then said quietly, His Grace's mother, the previous Duchess of Ravencourt. She died when His Grace was young, 12, I think. How did she die? Officially, pneumonia. Mrs. Graves's tone made it clear the official story wasn't the whole story. But between you and me, Your Grace, I think it was sadness. The old Duke, Adrian's father, he was a hard man, cold, cruel sometimes. He broke her bit by bit. Elena's stomach twisted. And Adrian saw that. He saw everything. He was a sharp boy, too sharp. Learned early that caring meant hurting. And his sister? Mrs. Graves' expression softened with old grief. Lady Caroline, sweet girl, too sweet for this place. She died 5 years ago. His Grace has never been the same since. Elena absorbed this, pieces clicking into place. Adrian hadn't just lost his sister. He'd watched his mother get slowly destroyed by a loveless marriage, then failed to save Caroline from a similar fate, trapped in a house where affection was weakness and warmth meant vulnerability. No wonder he'd built walls. No wonder he treated marriage like a business contract. It was the only model he'd ever known. Thank you, Elena said quietly, for telling me. Mrs. Graves nodded. He's a good man, Your Grace. Underneath it all. Just damaged. Aren't we all? Elena murmured. That night she knocked on Adrian's study door. Come. She entered. He was at his desk as always, surrounded by ledgers and correspondence, looking like he hadn't slept in days. I'm interrupting, Elena said. Yes? He set down his pen. But I don't mind. What do you need? Nothing. She hesitated. I wanted to see you. Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe. Sit, he said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. Elena sat. She noticed details she'd missed before. The book stacked haphazardly on the side table, the cold cup of tea forgotten near the window, the tension in his shoulders. When's the last time you slept? She asked. I sleep. When? Enough. That's not an answer, Adrian sighed. What is this, Elena? A wellness check? Maybe. You look exhausted. I'm fine. You're not. They stared at each other. I heard about your mother, Elena said quietly, and what your father was like. Adrian's face went very still. Mrs. Graves talks too much. She cares about you. She should mind her business. Adrian, don't. His voice was sharp. Don't try to psychoanalyze me based on half-told stories from servants. You don't know what it was like. Then tell me, why? Because I'm your wife, and maybe I want to actually know the person I married. You know enough. I know the Duke. I don't know the man. Adrian stood abruptly, pacing to the window. There is no difference. The Duke is all there is. I don't believe that. Believe what you want, he said flatly. It doesn't change reality. Elena stood too, frustration rising. Why are you so determined to keep me out? Because letting people in leads to loss, every single time. So you're just going to stay locked away forever? Never trust anyone? Never let anyone close? It's safer. It's lonely. I'd rather be lonely than destroyed. You're already destroyed, Adrian. You're just pretending you're not. The words hit like a slap. Adrian turned, his face pale with fury. Get out. No. I said get out. Make me. They stood there, breathing hard, staring each other down. Why are you doing this? Adrian demanded. Why do you care? Because someone has to, Elena shot back. Because you're drowning and you won't even admit you're in water. Because I'm tired of living in a house with a ghost who pretends to be a man. I gave you everything you asked for. You gave me money and a title and an empty marriage. You didn't give me you. There's nothing to give. That's a lie. Adrian's hands clenched into fists. Elena, stop. Why? Because it's uncomfortable? Because it makes you feel something? Because I can't. The words exploded out of him. I can't let you in. I can't care about you, because if I do, I'll lose you, just like everyone else. And I can't go through that again. His voice cracked on the last word. Elena's anger drained away, replaced by something that hurt worse. Adrian, she said softly, You can't control whether you lose people. You can only control whether you let them matter while they're here. That's easy for you to say. No, it's not. I lost my mother when I was 7. My father killed himself with worry and debt. The man I loved abandoned me. I know exactly what loss feels like. Then you should understand why I can't. I understand why you're afraid, Elena interrupted. But I also understand that fear isn't a life, it's a cage. Adrian sank into his chair, his face in his hands. He looked utterly defeated. Elena crossed to him slowly, carefully, like approaching something wild that might bolt. She knelt beside his chair. I'm not asking you to love me, she said quietly. I'm just asking you to stop pretending I don't exist. Adrian's hands dropped. His eyes were red-rimmed, exhausted. I don't know how, he admitted. I've been alone so long, I don't remember how to be anything else. Then we'll learn together, slowly, badly, with mistakes. What if I hurt you? You will, eventually, and I'll hurt you too. That's what people do. That's supposed to be comforting? It's honest. Adrian laughed, a broken, desperate sound. Then he reached out and took her hand. His fingers were cold. They always were. But they were real. I'm terrified, he said. Me too. This might not work. Probably won't. You're very pessimistic for someone advocating for trying. I'm realistic, Elena corrected. There's a difference. Adrian squeezed her hand just once, then let go. Stay, he said. Just for a while. I don't want to be alone right now. So Elena stayed. She pulled up a chair. They sat in silence while the fire burned low and the house settled around them. It wasn't romantic, but it was real, and for the first time since their wedding, the silence between them felt less like distance and more like peace. 2 days later, everything fell apart. Elena was in the library reviewing correspondence when Mrs. Graves appeared in the doorway looking pale and shaken. Your Grace, you have a visitor. Who? A Mr. Edward Carver. Elena's blood went cold. Edward Carver, the private lender, one of her father's creditors, the worst one, the one who charged interest rates that should have been illegal, the one Blackthorne had supposedly paid off. Show him in, Elena said, keeping her voice steady. Carver entered like he owned the place. He was a big man, well-dressed, but somehow greasy, with small eyes and a smile that never reached them. Your Grace, he said, bowing. What a pleasure. What a remarkable rise you've had. From debtor's daughter to duchess in mere months. Quite the accomplishment. Mr. Carver, I was under the impression my father's debts to you were settled. Oh, they are. Completely. The Duke was very generous. Carver's smile widened. I'm here on a different matter. Elena's stomach sank. What matter? Carver pulled a paper from his coat, set it on the table between them. This is a promissory note, signed by your late father 6 months before his death. He borrowed an additional £5,000. That's impossible. I reviewed all the debts. This one was off the books, a private arrangement. Your father was quite desperate at the time. Elena snatched up the paper. The signature looked right. The date was plausible, but something was wrong. This is forgery, she said flatly. Careful, Your Grace. Accusations of forgery are serious business. So is extortion. Carver's smile vanished. I'm not extorting anyone. I'm simply collecting a legitimate debt. You're lying. Prove it. Elena's mind raced. If this was real, it would reopen everything, the estate, the creditors, the whole nightmare she'd escaped. If it wasn't real, she'd need proof, and she had none. Either way, Carver had leverage. What do you want? She asked. £5,000 plus interest. Let's call it 7,000 total. And if I refuse? Then I take this to court, very publicly, and we air out all your family's dirty laundry for society to pick over. Your husband's reputation takes a hit. Your position becomes precarious. Blackmail, pure and simple. Get out, Elena said. I'll give you a week to think about it. Get out of my house. Carver stood slowly, tucking the paper back into his coat. 1 week, Your Grace. Then I go public. I'm sure your husband will be fascinated to learn about this little oversight. He left, his footsteps echoing through the hall. Elena stood there, shaking with rage and fear. She should tell Adrian. Should show him the paper, explain the situation, let him handle it. But the thought of going to him, of proving that she was still the helpless debtor's daughter, still dragging him into her family's mess, made her sick. She'd spent weeks trying to be something other than a burden, and now Carver was threatening to expose her as exactly that. No, she'd handle this herself. She had to. The week passed in a blur of desperate planning. Elena tried everything. She reviewed her father's papers again, looking for proof the note was fake. Nothing. She contacted a solicitor discreetly, asking about legal options. None that wouldn't go public. She even considered trying to find the money herself, maybe selling jewelry, negotiating with banks. But £7,000 was impossible. She was trapped, and she couldn't tell Adrian. Every time she saw him, at breakfast, in passing, that one evening he'd asked her to dinner, she smiled and acted normal and felt like she was drowning. On the 6th day, Carver sent a note. "Tomorrow, noon, bring the money or I go to the papers." Elena sat in her room staring at the message, feeling the walls close in. There was only one option left. She'd have to tell Adrian. She found him in his study that evening. "I need to talk to you," she said. He looked up from his work, smiled slightly. "That sounds ominous." "It is." The smile faded. "What's wrong?" Elena closed the door, sat down, and told him everything. She watched his face as she spoke, watched it go from concerned to confused to coldly furious. When she finished, silence. "Let me see the note," Adrian said finally. She handed it over. He studied it for a long moment, then set it down carefully. "It's fake," he said. "How do you know?" "The ink's too fresh. The signature's close, but not quite right. See how the W trails differently? And your father never used this particular form of promissory note. He preferred the standard legal template." Relief crashed through Elena. "So we can fight it. Fighting it means court, publicity, exactly what Carver wants." "Then what do we do?" Adrian's expression was glacial. "We destroy him." "Adrian, he tried to extort my wife, threaten my family, use forged documents to extract money." Adrian stood, his voice deadly calm. "I'm going to make sure Edward Carver never threatens anyone again." "How?" "I have resources, connections, evidence on half the businessmen in London, including Carver. He's run this scheme before. I can prove it." "You've been investigating him?" "I investigate everyone who poses a potential threat." Of course he did. "This will get ugly," Elena warned. "I don't care. It could damage your reputation." "Elena." Adrian crossed to her, knelt so they were eye level. "He threatened you. I don't care about ugly. I don't care about reputation. I care about protecting what's mine." The possessiveness in his voice should have bothered her. Instead, it felt like safety. "What do you need me to do?" she asked. "Meet with him tomorrow. Act like you're paying. I'll handle the rest." The next day, noon, Carver arrived right on schedule. Elena met him in the drawing room, a bank draft in hand. Fake, but he didn't know that. "I knew you'd see reason," Carver said smugly. "I saw necessity," Elena corrected. She held out the draft. Carver reached for it, and the door opened. Adrian walked in, followed by two men Elena didn't recognize and a very official-looking gentleman with a magistrate's seal. Carver went white. "Edward Carver," the magistrate said. "You're under arrest for fraud, forgery, and extortion. You can't. We have evidence," Adrian said coldly. 4 other victims. Forged promissory notes matching the one you presented to my wife. Witness testimony. Bank records showing where you've hidden the money." Carver lunged for the door. One of Adrian's men blocked him. "You did this," Carver snarled at Elena. "You lying—" Adrian moved so fast, Elena barely saw it. He had Carver by the throat, slamming him against the wall. "Speak to my wife again," Adrian said quietly, "and I will make you disappear, legally or otherwise. Are we clear?" Carver nodded frantically. Adrian released him. The magistrate's men took Carver away, still protesting, still threatening, but already defeated. The door closed. Silence. Elena realized she was shaking. "It's over," Adrian said, turning to her. "He can't hurt you. You destroyed him." "Yes. In less than a week." "I told you. I protect what's mine." Elena stared at him. This cold, ruthless man who'd just dismantled another human being's entire life with surgical precision. For her. "Thank you," she whispered. Adrian's expression softened fractionally. "You should have told me sooner. I didn't want to be a burden." "You're not a burden, Elena. You're my wife. There's a difference." He said it like a vow. Elena crossed to him, stopped just inches away. "I was wrong about you," she said. "How so?" "I thought you were frozen, but you're not. You're just careful about who you let see you melt." Adrian's breath caught, and then, slowly, so slowly Elena could have stopped him, he reached out and cupped her face. His hands were still cold, but his eyes were warm. "I'm terrified of this," he admitted. "Of what?" "Of how much I'm starting to care about you." Elena's heart stuttered. "Then be terrified with me," she said, "because I'm right there with you." Adrian leaned in. The study door crashed open. They sprang apart. Harrison the butler stood there, white-faced and breathing hard. "Your Grace! Your Grace! I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's been an incident." "What kind of incident?" Adrian demanded. "A fire at the Whitmore estate." Elena's world tilted. "What?" "The house is burning, Your Grace. They don't know how it started, but—" Harrison swallowed hard. "Mrs. Blevins is still inside." Elena was moving before Harrison finished speaking. She ran, actually ran, through the corridors of Ravencourt, skirts hitched up, propriety forgotten. Behind her, she heard Adrian barking orders, boots thundering, but she didn't slow down. Mrs. Blevins was inside a burning building. The woman who'd raised her, who'd stayed when everyone else left, who'd taught her to make pastry and told her she didn't break. Elena hit the front doors at full speed. A carriage was already being brought around. Adrian's doing, probably, but it wasn't fast enough. "Take me now," she demanded to the nearest groom. "Your Grace, the carriage. I said now!" The groom scrambled, got her onto a horse, not side saddle, no time for that, and Elena kicked the animal into motion before Adrian could stop her. She rode hard, the winter wind cutting through her dress, her hair tearing loose from its pins. The estate was only 2 miles away, but it felt like 200, every second stretching into eternity while her mind spun worst-case scenarios. Mrs. Blevins trapped, smoke inhalation, flames, the house collapsing. Elena pushed the horse faster. She smelled the smoke before she saw it. Then she crested the hill and her heart stopped. Whitmore House was an inferno. Flames poured from its upper windows, black smoke boiling into the gray sky. The entire east wing was engulfed. People, villagers, servants from nearby estates stood in a helpless cluster at the edge of the grounds, watching it burn. Elena threw herself off the horse before it fully stopped. "Where is she?" she shouted at the nearest person. "Where's Mrs. Blevins?" A man she vaguely recognized, one of the groundskeepers, pointed with a shaking hand. "Kitchen, Your Grace. She went in for something, wouldn't say what. Told us to stay back." "How long ago?" 5 minutes, maybe more." Elena stared at the burning house. The kitchen was ground floor, west wing. The fire hadn't reached it yet, but the smoke... She started forward. "Your Grace, no!" Someone grabbed her arm. "You can't... It's not safe." Elena ripped free. "Let go of me!" "You'll die in there." "Then I'll die." She ran, straight toward the flames, toward the heat that hit her like a wall, toward the roar of fire consuming everything she'd ever known. The front door was already open, hanging crooked on its hinges. Elena plunged inside. The smoke was immediate and choking. She pulled her sleeve over her mouth and nose, squinting through the haze. The entrance hall, what was left of it, was hellish. Flames crawled up the walls. The ceiling groaned ominously. Heat seared her skin. "Mrs. Blevins!" she screamed. No answer. Elena pushed forward, staying low where the air was slightly clearer. She knew this house, had run through these halls as a child. Even half blind with smoke, she knew the way. Left corridor, through the morning room, kitchen at the back. The morning room was fully ablaze. Elena ducked and ran, feeling the heat scorch her arms, her face. Something crashed behind her, a beam, maybe, and she didn't look back. The kitchen door was closed. Elena shoved it open, and there, collapsed on the floor beside the old stove, was Mrs. Blevins. "No, no, no!" Elena dropped beside her, hands shaking. Mrs. Blevins, wake up! The cook's eyes fluttered. She was breathing, but barely, her face gray with smoke. In her arms, clutched tight, a small wooden box. Stubborn woman, Elena choked out, half laughing, half sobbing. What was worth this? Mrs. Blevins' lips moved. Elena leaned closer. Your mother's letters? Elena's vision blurred. The box. The one Mrs. Blevins had always kept in the kitchen, filled with letters her mother had written before she died. The only pieces of her left. You idiot, Elena whispered. You beautiful, stupid idiot. She grabbed Mrs. Blevins under the arms and pulled. The woman was dead weight. Elena wasn't strong enough for this. The smoke was getting thicker, the heat unbearable. The ceiling cracked ominously above them. Come on, Elena gasped, dragging her inch by inch toward the door. Come on, you don't get to die on me. The ceiling groaned. Elena looked up and saw it starting to cave. She threw herself over Mrs. Blevins, arms wrapped around the cook's head, bracing for impact. Someone grabbed her. Strong hands, pulling both of them backward with impossible force, hauling them through the kitchen door just as the ceiling collapsed behind them in an explosion of sparks and debris. Elena rolled, coughing, her lungs screaming. When her vision cleared, Adrian was there. Covered in soot, his coat singed, his face set in absolute fury. You idiot! He snarled, echoing Elena's own words. You reckless, stupid... He stopped, pulled her into his arms so hard it hurt. You could have died, he said against her hair, his voice shaking. She was in there. I don't care. I don't care if the whole damn house was in there. You don't run into fire. You did. That's different. It's not, Elena coughed. It's exactly the same. Adrian pulled back, gripping her shoulders, his eyes wild. If I'd lost you, you didn't. He kissed her, hard and desperate and tasting of smoke and fear, his hands cradling her face like she was the only solid thing in a collapsing world. Elena kissed him back. Around them, the house burned. People shouted. Mrs. Blevins groaned weakly as someone, a doctor, Elena realized dimly, began examining her. But in that moment, none of it mattered. Just Adrian, just this, just proof they were both alive. He broke away, breathing hard, and pressed his forehead to hers. Don't do that again, he said. Can't promise that. Elena, you'd do the same. That's not the point. It's exactly the point. Someone cleared their throat. They pulled apart. The doctor was kneeling beside Mrs. Blevins, checking her pulse. She'll live, he said. Smoke inhalation, but she's strong. Just needs rest and clean air. Elena nearly collapsed with relief. Adrian caught her, held her steady. Take her to Ravencourt, he told the doctor. Whatever she needs, spare no expense. Yes, Your Grace. They loaded Mrs. Blevins onto a cart, the wooden box still clutched in her unconscious grip. Elena watched the cook's chest rise and fall, each breath a small miracle. Then she turned to look at what was left of her childhood home. It was gone. The fire had consumed everything. The portrait of her mother, the furniture, the memories, all of it reduced to smoke and ash and ruin. She should feel devastated. Instead, she felt free. It's just a house, Adrian said quietly beside her. It was my past. Was. Past tense. Elena looked at him. His face was streaked with soot, his eyes red from smoke, his coat ruined. He'd run into a burning building for her. This man who claimed he didn't care, didn't feel, didn't let anyone in. He'd risked his life without hesitation. Thank you, she said. For what? Coming after me. I'll always come after you. He said it simply, like it was fact. That's the deal. That wasn't the deal. It is now. They stood in the ruins and watched the fire burn itself out. The investigation started the next day. Elena had assumed it was an accident. Old house, old wiring, winter dryness. These things happened. But Adrian wasn't satisfied with assumptions. He brought in investigators, fire experts, people who looked at burn patterns and ash residue and came to conclusions that made Elena's blood run cold. It was arson, the lead investigator said, standing in Adrian's study with his hat in his hands. Accelerant used in 3 locations: east wing, attic, and near the kitchen entrance. Someone wanted this fire to spread fast. The kitchen entrance, Elena repeated slowly, where Mrs. Blevins was. The investigator nodded. Whoever set this knew the layout, knew where to trap someone. Adrian's face went deadly still. This wasn't about the house. This was about Elena. Your Grace, I can't speculate. You don't need to. I will. Adrian turned to Elena. Who wants you hurt? No one. I'm nobody. You're a duchess. You're my wife. That makes you a target. Elena's mind raced. Who would? And then it hit her. Carver, she breathed. Adrian's expression darkened. He's in custody. But his associates aren't. You destroyed him publicly, ruined his business. If he has friends, family, they'd want revenge, Adrian finished grimly. He turned to the investigator. Find out who Carver's been in contact with, prison visitors, letters, everything. Yes, Your Grace. The man left. Elena sank into a chair, the full weight of it crushing her. This is my fault. If we hadn't exposed him. Stop. Adrian knelt in front of her. This is not your fault. Carver made his choices. So did whoever set that fire. You are not responsible for other people's cruelty. Mrs. Blevins almost died. But she didn't because you saved her. You saved us both. Then we saved each other, Adrian said. Stop trying to shoulder all the blame, Elena. You're not alone in this anymore. She looked at him. This man who'd been a stranger 4 months ago, who'd offered her a cold contract and nothing more. Now he was on his knees in front of her, holding her hands, looking at her like she mattered more than anything. When did this happen? She asked softly. When did what happen? When did you start caring? Adrian was quiet for a long moment. I don't know, somewhere between the wedding and the fire. Probably the night you called me out for being a coward. I didn't call you a coward. You did. You just used nicer words. Elena laughed despite everything. And that made you care? It made me realize I already did. I was just too afraid to admit it. He stood, pulling her up with him, and wrapped his arms around her. They stood like that for a long time. Outside, the investigators worked. The house smoldered. The world kept turning. But inside Adrian's study, for the first time, Elena felt like she'd found something solid. Not safety. They'd just proven how fragile that was. But partnership. Someone who'd run into fire for her. Someone she'd run into fire for right back. It took 3 days to trace the arson back to Carver's nephew, a young man with gambling debts and a grudge. He confessed quickly under questioning, claiming he'd just wanted to scare Elena. Hadn't meant for anyone to get hurt. The courts didn't care about his intentions. He was arrested, charged, sentenced to 15 years. But the damage was done. Society had taken notice. The Duke and Duchess of Ravencourt had been attacked. One of them had nearly died, and the other had quite literally run through fire to save a servant. The story spread like wildfire, pun intended. Within a week, every drawing room in London was buzzing with it. Lady Ashford, the same woman who'd hosted that first miserable ball, called personally. Elena received her in Ravencourt's formal sitting room, bracing for condescension or pity. Instead, Ashford looked at her with something like respect. Your Grace, she said, taking the offered seat. I owe you an apology. Elena blinked. For what? For underestimating you. When you married His Grace, I assumed you were a fortune hunter, a desperate girl making a calculated move. I was, Elena said evenly. All of those things. Ashford smiled. Yes, but you're also brave, apparently, and loyal. The whole of London is talking about how you risked your life for a servant. That kind of devotion is rare, especially among our set. Mrs. Blevins isn't just a servant, she's family. I see that now, as does everyone else. Ashford leaned forward slightly. You've changed the narrative, Your Grace. When you arrived, people saw you as weak, someone to be pitied or mocked. Now they see strength. That matters. I don't care what they see. Perhaps you should, because what they see determines how they treat you, and right now you have their respect. Use it. It was pragmatic advice from an unlikely source. Why are you telling me this? Elena asked. Because I like women who surprise me, Ashford said simply. And because Ravencourt deserves a duchess who's more than decorative. It seems he's found one. She stood, extended her hand. Elena shook it, feeling like she'd just passed some invisible test. "The winter ball," Ashford said. "Next month. You'll attend as my guest of honor." What? "Consider it my way of making amends for that dreadful first evening. I'll make sure everyone knows you're under my protection. It'll smooth things considerably." "Why would you do that?" Ashford smiled. "Because I enjoy shaking things up. And you, my dear, are exactly the kind of shake this stuffy world needs." She left in a swirl of expensive perfume and rustling silk. Elena sat alone, processing. Respect, protection. An invitation to be guest of honor. 6 months ago, she'd been nobody. A debtor's daughter facing eviction. Now she was someone people paid attention to. It should have felt triumphant. Instead, it felt fragile, like she was balancing on ice that could crack any moment. Adrian found her an hour later, still sitting there. "What's wrong?" he asked immediately. "Lady Ashford was here." "And?" "She apologized. Invited us to her winter ball as guests of honor." Adrian raised an eyebrow. "That's good. Is it?" "Elena, you just got acknowledged by one of society's most influential women. Yes, it's good. It feels like a trap. It's an opportunity." He sat beside her. "What are you really worried about?" Elena struggled to articulate it. "That I'll fail. That I'll do something wrong, and all this," she gestured vaguely, "will collapse. That I'll prove everyone right who said I didn't belong here." "You belong here because you chose to be here," Adrian said. "Not because society gave you permission. Their approval is nice, but it's not required." "Easy for you to say. You were born into this." "I was born into a title. I wasn't born knowing how to navigate it. I learned. Same as you're learning. And you're doing better than you think." "I ran into a fire." "Exactly. You're brave when it matters. That counts for more than perfect table manners." Elena leaned against him. He put his arm around her shoulders, casually, naturally, like they'd been doing this for years instead of weeks. "I'm terrified of the ball," she admitted. "So am I." "You're never terrified." "I'm always terrified. I just hide it better." He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "We'll go together. If it's awful, we leave. If someone insults you, I'll destroy them, same as always." "That's not a sustainable strategy." "It's worked so far." Despite everything, Elena smiled. They sat in comfortable silence until Margaret knocked softly. "Your Grace, Mrs. Blevins is awake. She's asking for you." Elena was on her feet immediately. Mrs. Blevins had been installed in one of Ravencourt's guest rooms, a large, sunny space that was probably nicer than anywhere she'd ever lived. She was propped up on pillows, pale but alert, the wooden box sitting on the table beside her bed. "You stupid, wonderful woman," Elena said, sitting on the edge of the bed. Mrs. Blevins smiled weakly. "I couldn't let them burn, miss. Your mother's letters. They're all you have left of her." "You're what I have left of her," Elena said, her voice thick. "You raised me. You stayed. You matter more than paper." "The paper matters too." Elena picked up the box, opened it carefully. Inside, dozens of letters in her mother's elegant handwriting. Letters to her father, to baby Elena, to friends. Pieces of a life Elena had been too young to remember. "Thank you," she whispered. "Don't thank me. I'm the one who nearly got us both killed." Mrs. Blevins gripped Elena's hand. "Your mother would be proud of you, miss. The way you've handled everything. The strength you've shown." "I don't feel strong." "That's because you're in the middle of it. But from where I'm sitting, you're the strongest person I know." Elena stayed with her for an hour, reading through letters, talking about nothing important, just being together. When she finally left, she found Adrian waiting in the corridor. "How is she?" he asked. "Recovering, stubborn as ever." "Good. I like her." "She likes you too. Said you have good bones." Adrian laughed, a real laugh, not his usual dry humor. High praise. They walked back to the main wing together. "I've been thinking," Adrian said. Dangerous. About the ball. About what Ashford's invitation means." "Which is?" "That you've won." He stopped, turning to face her. "When we married, I told you this was a transaction, a role to play. But you've turned it into something real. You didn't just survive society, you made them respect you, on your own terms. We did it together." "No, you did the hard part. I just provided the title and the money. You provided everything that actually matters. Elena's chest tightened. Adrian, I'm proud of you, he said simply. I should have said that sooner, but I'm saying it now. You're extraordinary, Elena, and I'm... He paused, like the words were hard. I'm grateful you said yes. That day in the garden. I'm grateful you took the chance. Even though it's been a disaster. It hasn't been a disaster. It's been complicated, but not a disaster. Elena stepped closer, reached up to touch his face. I'm grateful too, she said, for the proposal, for the protection, for running into fire when you didn't have to. I had to. You were in there. That's my point. She kissed him, soft and deliberate and meaning every second of it. When they pulled apart, Adrian was smiling, actually smiling wide and genuine. We're really doing this, aren't we? He said. Doing what? Caring about each other. Being married for real, not just on paper. Seems like it. Terrifying. Absolutely. Worth it? Elena considered. Everything that had happened, the fire, the extortion, the fear, the risk, and everything they'd built anyway. Trust, partnership, something that was starting to feel like love. Yes, she said. Worth it. The winter ball arrived faster than Elena expected. She dressed carefully, a gown in deep emerald that made her look regal instead of desperate, her hair styled by Margaret with actual skill this time, jewelry that Adrian had given her just that morning. To match your courage, he'd said, fastening a diamond necklace around her throat. Now they stood in front of Ashford Hall again, the same location as their first disaster. But everything was different. They walked in together, not separated, not distant, but side by side with Adrian's hand firm on her waist. The announcement came. His Grace, the Duke of Ravencourt, and Her Grace, the Duchess of Ravencourt. The room turned, but this time, instead of whispers and sneers, there was applause. Genuine applause. Elena looked around, startled. Lady Ashford swept forward, beaming. Your Grace, welcome. Come, you must meet everyone. She guided them through the crowd, not like they were outsiders, but like they were the main attraction. People bowed, smiled, offered genuine congratulations. We heard about the fire. So brave. Your devotion to your household is admirable. Elena nodded and smiled and said the right things, but inside she was reeling. This was respect. Real, actual respect. At dinner, she was seated at the head table, beside Lady Ashford, a position of honor. Adrian was across from her, and their eyes met over the crystal and candlelight. He mouthed, "Told you." She mouthed back, "Shut up." He grinned. The meal was excellent. The conversation pleasant. No one insulted her. No one questioned her place. When the dancing started, Adrian claimed her immediately. They moved across the floor, perfectly in sync now, months of being around each other translating into physical ease. How does it feel? He asked quietly. Surreal. You've arrived, Elena. Officially, they can't dismiss you anymore. They could try. Let them. You'll handle it. He spun her gently. You've handled everything else. We have. Yes, we have. The music swelled, the room spun, and Elena truly realized that she'd done it. Not alone, not perfectly, but she'd survived. She'd adapted. She'd turned a desperate marriage into something real. She'd won. The song ended. Adrian bowed. Elena curtsied, and the room erupted in applause again. Later, standing on the terrace in the cold night air, Elena looked out at the grounds and breathed. Tired? Adrian asked, joining her. Exhausted. Want to leave? Not yet. She leaned against the railing. I want to enjoy this for a minute. The winning. It suits you. What does? Power. You wear it well. Elena laughed. I'm not powerful. You're a duchess who commands respect from people who used to mock her. That's power. Our power. Ours, Adrian agreed. He put his arm around her. Partners. Partners, Elena echoed. They stood together in the cold, watching their breath mist in the air, feeling the weight of what they'd built. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. And that was enough. Inside, the ballroom noise swelled. Laughter, music, the clink of champagne glasses, celebrating people who'd finally decided Elena was worth celebrating. But out here on the terrace, it was just them and the winter silence. Adrian's arm stayed around her shoulders. Elena leaned into the warmth of him, still getting used to the fact that she could, that he'd let her. "We should go back in," she said eventually. "People will talk." "Let them talk. They'll do it anyway." "Adrian, 5 more minutes." His voice was quiet. "I just want 5 minutes where it's not performance, where it's just us." Elena tilted her head to look at him. His profile was sharp against the night sky, his expression softer than she'd ever seen it in public. "You hate this," she realized. "The balls, the socializing, all of it." "I tolerate it." "That's not the same thing." "No, it's not." He looked down at her. "But it's easier with you there, less exhausting." "Why?" "Because you don't pretend. Everyone else in there is wearing a mask, playing a role. But you, even when you're being polite, you're still you. It's refreshing." "I thought you wanted me to play the role, be the perfect Duchess." "I thought I did too. Turns out I was wrong about a lot of things." Elena turned to face him fully. "Like what?" Adrian was quiet for a long moment, his gaze searching her face like he was trying to memorize it. "Like thinking I could keep this transactional," he said finally. "Like believing I could marry you and not care what happened to you. Like assuming love was something I'd successfully frozen out of my life forever." Elena's breath caught. "Adrian, I'm not good at this," he interrupted. "The feelings part, the words. But I need you to know—" He stopped, started again. "The fire changed something. Watching you run into that building, thinking I might lose you, it broke something in me. Or maybe fixed something. I'm not sure which." "Both," Elena said softly. "Probably both. I love you." The words came out rough, unpracticed. "I don't know when it started. Maybe that night in my study when you called me out. Maybe earlier, but it's there now, and I can't put it back." Elena felt tears prick her eyes. "Do you want to put it back?" Terrified of it. "But no, I don't want to put it back." She reached up and cupped his face, her thumb brushing across his cheekbone. "I love you too, and I'm just as terrified. But I think that's okay. Being scared together." Adrian closed his eyes, leaning into her touch, like a man starved for it. "I don't deserve you," he murmured. "You don't get to decide that. I do. And I say you do." He kissed her then, not desperate like after the fire, but slow and deliberate and full of everything he couldn't say out loud. Elena kissed him back, her hands sliding up to tangle in his hair, feeling the last of the walls between them crumble into dust. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. "We should probably go back inside," he said. "Probably." Neither of them moved. The terrace door opened. Margaret appeared, looking apologetic. "Your Grace? Lady Ashford is asking for you both. She wants to make a toast." Adrian sighed. "Of course she does." They followed Margaret back inside, hands linked, and the sight of it, the untouchable Duke of Ravencourt holding his wife's hand in public, sent a ripple through the room. Lady Ashford was waiting near the center, champagne glass raised, her smile sharp and knowing. "Ladies and gentlemen," she called out, silencing the crowd with pure force of personality. "A toast to the Duke and Duchess of Ravencourt, a marriage we all dismissed as convenient, yet has proven to be anything but." Murmurs of agreement, a few embarrassed laughs. "We underestimated you both," Ashford continued, looking directly at Elena. "We saw strategy where there was courage. We saw desperation where there was strength. The Duchess has shown us what real loyalty looks like, what real partnership looks like. And in doing so, she's reminded us all what marriage should be. Not a contract, but a choice. Made every day. Especially on the hard days." She raised her glass higher. "To the Duke and Duchess of Ravencourt, may you continue to surprise us all." "To the Duke and Duchess!" the room echoed. Elena felt her face flush. Adrian squeezed her hand. They raised their glasses and drank, and the crowd erupted in genuine applause. This wasn't pity, wasn't mockery. This was acceptance. Elena had fought for it, bled for it, run through fire for it, and now, finally, it was hers. The ride home was quiet but comfortable. Elena sat beside Adrian, not across from him like that first awful carriage ride, their hands still linked, her head resting on his shoulder. "That went better than expected," she said. "You sound surprised." "I'm always surprised when things don't explode." "Fair." Adrian pressed a kiss to her hair. "Though in our defense, a lot of things have exploded. Literally, in at least one case." "At least?" Elena laughed, feeling lighter than she had in months. "What happens now?" "What do you mean?" "We've won society's approval, survived assassination attempts, declared our feelings. What's next?" Adrian was quiet for a moment. "Whatever we want." "That's the point of having power, Elena. We get to decide what comes next." "And what do you want?" "Honestly?" He shifted so he could look at her properly. "I want to actually be married to you. Not just legally, not just strategically. I want the real thing, messy and complicated and real." "That's what I want too." "Then we'll do that." "It won't be easy." "Nothing with us is easy." Adrian smiled. "But I'm starting to think that's what makes it worth it." The carriage turned onto the long drive leading to Ravencourt. The house rose up against the night sky, still imposing, still cold-looking from the outside. But Elena didn't see it that way anymore. Now it looked like home. The next morning, Elena woke to sunlight streaming through her bedroom window and the unusual sound of Adrian's voice in the hallway. She pulled on a robe and opened the door to find him arguing with Harrison about something. His tone exasperated but not angry. "Don't care if it's traditional, Harrison. We're doing it anyway." "But, Your Grace, the Duchess has her own wing." "Which is absurd. We're married. We should share rooms." Elena's heart stuttered. Adrian noticed her standing there and stopped mid-sentence. "You're awake. You're reorganizing the house." "I'm consolidating. There's a difference." He turned back to Harrison. "Move my things to the Duchess's wing, or move hers to mine. I don't care which, but I'm done living in separate corners of this place like strangers." Harrison looked at Elena, clearly hoping she'd be the voice of reason. "Do what he says," Elena said, fighting a smile. The butler's shoulders sagged. "Yes, Your Grace." He retreated, muttering about propriety and tradition. Adrian crossed to Elena, stopping just inches away. "I should have asked first." "You should have." "I'm asking now. Can I move into your rooms, or would you prefer to move into mine?" "Mine are warmer." "Then mine it is." "That's not what I—" Elena stopped, laughed. "You know what? Fine, yours. But I'm redecorating." "Deal." He kissed her quickly and headed back down the hall, already barking orders about which furniture to keep and which to store. Elena watched him go, feeling absurdly happy about the most mundane thing in the world, sharing a bedroom with her husband. 6 months ago, she'd have thought that was the bare minimum of marriage. Now it felt like a victory. The consolidation took 3 days. By the end of it, Adrian's former study had been converted into a shared sitting room. Elena's books mixed with his on the shelves. Her writing desk sat next to his larger one by the window. Their clothes shared a wardrobe that Harrison had somehow procured overnight. It was chaotic and imperfect, and exactly right. The first night they actually slept in the same bed, not for show, not out of necessity, but by choice. Adrian lay on his back, staring at the ceiling like he was trying to solve a complex equation. "You're thinking too loud," Elena said, curled on her side, watching him. "I'm not thinking. You're always thinking. Fine. I'm thinking this is strange." "Sharing a bed with your wife?" "Sharing a bed with anyone. I haven't—" He paused. "Not since I was a child, after my mother died. I couldn't sleep alone for weeks. Caroline would sneak into my room and we'd talk until dawn." Elena's chest ached. "You miss her. Every day. Tell me about her, not the death, the life. What was she like?" Adrian was quiet for so long Elena thought he wouldn't answer. Then, relentlessly cheerful. Even when things were awful, she'd find something to smile about. A flower growing through a crack in the stones. A bird singing. Anything. It drove me insane sometimes. How could she be happy when everything was falling apart? Maybe that was how she survived it. Maybe. Adrian's voice was soft. She used to tell me I thought too much. That I needed to feel more. I told her feelings were dangerous. She said that was the point. That danger meant you were alive. She sounds wise. She was 17. Wisdom isn't about age. No, I suppose it's not. Adrian finally turned to look at Elena. She would have liked you. You remind me of her sometimes. The way you face things head on. The way you refuse to break. I break, Elena said. I just do it privately. That's called strength, Elena. Or stubbornness. Both. He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. I'm glad you're here. In this bed. In this house. In my life. Even though it's messy? Especially because it's messy. Elena shifted closer, fitting herself against his side. His arm came around her automatically, like they'd been doing this for years instead of hours. I'm glad too, she murmured. They fell asleep like that, tangled together, breathing in sync, finally in the same place at the same time. Spring came slowly to Ravencourt. The snow melted. The garden started to green. The house felt less like a mausoleum and more like something alive. Elena threw herself into running the estate properly, not just managing the household, but understanding the finances, the tenants, the business holdings that came with the dukedom. Adrian taught her, patient and thorough, treating her like an equal partner instead of a decorative addition. They fought sometimes. Sharp, quick arguments about money or decisions or whose turn it was to deal with the latest social obligation. But they always resolved it, usually in bed, sometimes with words, sometimes without. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. One afternoon in late April, Elena was reviewing correspondence when a letter caught her eye. The handwriting was familiar. She opened it, her stomach dropping as she read. Adrian, she called. He appeared from his study, still holding whatever document he'd been working on. What's wrong? Thomas is getting married. Adrian's expression went carefully neutral. And? And he's inviting us to the wedding. He has nerve, I'll give him that. Elena handed him the letter. Adrian scanned it, his jaw tightening. He's marrying Penelope Hartwick, he said, the shipping heiress. So he found another rich girl. A richer one, actually. Her dowry could buy 3 Whitmore estates. Elena should feel angry, jealous, something. Instead, she felt nothing. Maybe pity. I'm not going, she said. You sure? It might be satisfying. Show him what he gave up. I don't need to show him anything. I already know what he gave up. She took the letter back and tossed it in the fire. Besides, I have better things to do than watch Thomas make the same mistake twice. Like what? Like rebuilding Whitmore House. Adrian stared at her. What? You said you'd keep the estate. You did. You've maintained the grounds, settled with the insurance company, but the house is still ruins. I want to rebuild it. Elena, not to live in, to preserve, for the tenants, for the history. She turned to face him fully. My mother's letters are all I have left of her physically. But that house, that land, it holds her memory too. I want to restore it, make it something good again. Adrian studied her for a long moment. That's a massive undertaking. I know. It'll take years, cost a fortune. I know that too. And you want to do it anyway. Yes, he smiled. Then we'll do it, together. The rebuilding started in May. Elena oversaw every detail, working with architects, choosing materials, deciding which parts to restore and which to redesign. She had them build a library in honor of her mother, filled with books and natural light. A kitchen twice the size of the old one for Mrs. Blevins, who'd recovered fully and now divided her time between Ravencourt and supervising the Whitmore reconstruction. It was slow, painstaking work, but watching the house rise from ash felt like resurrection. Adrian was there for most of it, not hovering, but present, offering opinions when asked, solving problems when they arose, standing beside her on the hill overlooking the construction and just being there. This is going to be beautiful, he said one afternoon, watching workers frame out the new east wing. It'll never be what it was, Elena said. No, it'll be better, because you built it knowing what matters. Which is? That places are just places. It's the people in them that make them home. Elena slipped her hand into his. When did you get philosophical? Around the time I married you. You're a bad influence. The worst. He kissed her temple. Thank you. For what? For not giving up. On the house. On me. On us. I'm stubborn, remember? I'm counting on it. They stood there as the sun set, watching the house take shape, building something new from the ruins of the old. The winter ball came around again. 1 full year since Elena and Adrian's first public appearance as a married couple. 1 year since Thomas had tried to humiliate her and failed. This time, they arrived fashionably late, a deliberate choice that made their entrance more dramatic. The announcement rang out. His Grace, the Duke of Ravencourt, and Her Grace, the Duchess of Ravencourt. The ballroom went quiet, then erupted in applause. Elena descended the stairs on Adrian's arm, wearing a gown that cost more than her father's annual income used to be. Deep burgundy silk with gold embroidery, diamonds at her throat and ears. She looked like a duchess. More importantly, she felt like one. Lady Ashford swept forward immediately. "Your Grace, we've been waiting for you. Come, you must tell everyone about the Whitmore restoration. The whole of London is buzzing about it." They were absorbed into the crowd. People wanted to hear about the construction, about Elena's vision for the estate, about her plans to open parts of it to local families. It was work she was proud of, work that mattered. Adrian stayed close but let her shine, his hand occasionally finding the small of her back. A reassurance more than a claim. Halfway through the evening, Elena spotted Thomas across the room. He was with his new wife, pretty, young, looking vaguely overwhelmed by the crowd. He caught Elena's eye and quickly looked away. Elena felt nothing, no anger, no satisfaction, not even pity anymore, just indifference. She turned back to the conversation she'd been having, something about water rights and tenant housing, and forgot he existed. Later, during the dancing, Adrian pulled her close. "You didn't even react to seeing Carmichael," he observed. "There was nothing to react to. A year ago, you would have cared." "A year ago, I was a different person." "Better or worse?" Elena considered. "Different, harder in some ways, softer in others." "Same." Adrian spun her gently. "I don't think I'd recognize the man I was a year ago. He was so certain feelings were weakness. And now? Now I think maybe they're the opposite. Caring about you makes me stronger, more focused, like I have something worth protecting beyond just business and reputation. That's very romantic for someone who claimed not to do romance. I'm learning. You're a good teacher. Liar. You're terrible at taking instruction, only when the instruction is bad." Elena laughed, letting him sweep her across the floor, feeling lighter than air. They left the ball early again, but this time not because of disaster, simply because they wanted to be home, wanted to be alone together, wanted to choose each other over society, again and again, until it became second nature. In the carriage, Elena rested her head on Adrian's shoulder. "I think we did it," she said quietly. "Did what?" "Survived, both of us. Together." "More than survived," Adrian corrected. "We built something real. It's still fragile, though." "Everything real is fragile. That's what makes it valuable." Elena lifted her head to look at him. "When did you get so wise?" "I married up. It's rubbing off." She swatted his arm, but she was smiling. The house rose up before them, Ravencourt, no longer cold and imposing, but warm with light from every window. Home. They walked inside together, shedding coats and gloves, heading upstairs to their shared rooms. In the bedroom, Adrian helped Elena with the complicated fastenings of her gown, something he'd gotten surprisingly good at over the months. "I've been thinking," he said as he worked, "always dangerous, about the future, about what we want it to look like." Elena turned to face him, the gown half unlaced. "And I think," he paused, looking almost nervous, "I think I'd like children, eventually, if you want them." Elena's breath caught. They'd never discussed this, never planned that far ahead. "You want to be a father," she said slowly. "I want to try. To do it better than mine did. To give them what Caroline and I didn't have. Warmth, safety, parents who actually care. You'd be a good father." "I'd try. I'd probably fail sometimes. We both would. But we'd try together." Elena reached up to touch his face. "Yes, I want that too. Not now, maybe, but someday." Adrian pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. "Thank you." "For what?" "For giving me a future worth wanting." They stood like that for a long moment, holding each other in the quiet of their bedroom, the rest of the world distant and unimportant. Then Adrian finished unlacing her gown, and they fell into bed together, tangled and laughing and utterly, imperfectly content. Summer arrived hot and bright. The Whitmore restoration was nearly complete. The house rebuilt, the gardens planted, the tenants already moving into the new cottages Elena had commissioned. On the day of the official dedication, half of society turned out, not because they cared about a minor estate in Kent, but because the Duke and Duchess of Ravencourt had made it matter. Elena stood in front of the rebuilt house, no longer ruins, but something new and beautiful, and addressed the crowd. "This house burned," she said simply, "not just in the fire, but years before that. My father's debts, my mother's death, the slow decay of trying to survive on nothing. It died long before it actually fell." She paused, looking at Adrian standing to her right, Mrs. Blevins to her left. The tenants gathered around. But death isn't always the end. Sometimes it's a clearing away, making space for something stronger, something built on truth instead of pretense. She gestured to the house behind her. "This isn't a restoration, it's a rebirth. And it belongs to all of you, the people who live here, work here, call this place home. It's yours to use, to enjoy, to build your own futures in." Applause. Genuine and warm. Elena stepped back, letting the tenants come forward, letting them explore their new homes. Adrian found her hand, squeezed it. "Good speech," he said. "I meant every word." "I know." They watched the celebration together, standing slightly apart from the crowd, content to just observe. "We did something good here," Elena said. "You did something good here. I just funded it." "You did more than that. You believed in it, in me." "Easiest investment I ever made." Elena leaned into him, feeling the solid warmth of his presence. "I love you. I love you too." The words still felt new, still carried weight, but they were getting easier every time. That night, back at Ravencourt, they sat in their shared study, both working on separate projects, comfortable in the silence. Elena was reviewing plans for a school she wanted to build on the Whitmore estate. Adrian was handling correspondence from his business interests. Normal, domestic, peaceful. Everything Elena had never thought she'd have. "I'm happy," she said suddenly. Adrian looked up. "What?" "I'm happy, right now, in this moment. I just wanted to say it out loud." He set down his pen, crossed to her, pulled her up from her chair and into his arms. "Me too," he said quietly. "I'm happy too." They swayed slightly, dancing to music only they could hear. "A year ago I was drowning," Elena said, "losing everything, desperate and alone. And now? Now I have everything I didn't know I needed." "Same," Adrian said. "I was frozen, convinced that staying cold was the only way to stay safe. You proved me wrong. We proved each other wrong. Best mistake I ever made. Marrying me? Thinking I could keep it transactional." Elena pulled back slightly to look at him. "We're going to be okay, aren't we? Whatever comes next, we'll handle it." "Together," Adrian confirmed. "We'll handle it together." And standing there in their shared study, in the house that had become home, Elena believed it. Not because their life was perfect. It wasn't. Not because they'd solved all their problems. They hadn't. But because they'd learned the secret that everyone else missed. Love wasn't about perfection. It was about choosing each other, again and again, especially on the hard days. It was about running into fire when necessary, about building from ruins, about turning survival into something stronger. The winter proposal had saved her life. But the messy, complicated, imperfect marriage they'd built together? That's what made it worth living. Years later, when people asked about the Duke and Duchess of Ravencourt, and they always asked because their story had become legend, they heard different things depending on who was telling it. Some said it was a love story. Some said it was a business arrangement that got lucky. Some said it was proof that even the coldest hearts could thaw. All of them were right, and all of them were wrong. Because what Adrian and Elena had built wasn't a fairy tale or a cautionary tale or a romance novel. It was just a marriage. Difficult and real and constantly evolving, built on honesty instead of poetry, on partnership instead of passion alone. On the simple revolutionary idea that two broken people could make each other whole, not by fixing what was damaged, but by accepting it and building around it. They had children eventually. 3 of them, each one a little wild and a lot loved. They grew old together in Ravencourt, though they spent summers at Whitmore, watching the tenants' children play in the rebuilt gardens. They fought and made up and fought again. They supported each other through loss and celebrated each other's wins. They became the kind of partnership that society pointed to as aspirational, not because it was perfect, but because it was real. And on winter mornings, when frost covered the windows and the world felt frozen, Adrian would pull Elena close and whisper the same thing he'd said that first night after the fire. "I'll always come after you. That's the deal." And Elena would whisper back, "Same, always." Because that was the truth they'd learned together. Love wasn't the proposal in the ruins. Love was choosing to stay when the ruins became a home. Over and over and over again. Until staying became second nature. Until choice became certainty. Until two people who'd started as strangers became unbreakable. Together.